And the current best-selling book in the world is Twilight, which is a young adult book for kids aged 15, 16, or in Hong Kong, 2021, because we're a bit slow here. All my students at university carry this religiously. Okay, so that's an instant history of children's literature. How do we define children's literature? Okay, this is obviously a children's book. And let's look in our school libraries. What do we find? We find this. Anybody read this? Yeah, it's a good book actually, but sort of about insanity and that sort of thing. What's this book about? Murder and rape. What's this book about? It's about a guy who keeps a woman chained up in a secret room in his house. Not the sort of thing I would normally give to my kids. So it's a bit tricky, isn't it? So the themes of these books are insanity, rape, adultery, suicide, murder, that sort of thing. So it's hard to define children's books these days. A couple of years ago I was given a project. A group of writers in Hong Kong had written children's short stories and asked me to edit it and get it published. Yes, I'll be delighted, I said, and I received all the short stories and realised they were all short stories about kids, but none of them were children's stories. They were stories about kids. They were stories starring kids. This was a massive problem. This is me after I received the manuscript. Then made the same mistake a lot of people make with this book. All the Pretty Horses. It's a book about horses. It has to be for children, doesn't it? And look at that title. And what's the story about? It's about a young child. So, but it's definitely not for kids. It's about horse thieves and murder. So having a child as a protagonist does not make it a kid's book. I went to the first meeting of the Indian Children's Literature Association, or festival, or whatever it was, conference, and an academic stood up and gave a speech about this. Now, I love Calvin and Hobbes, I expect you to do, but Calvin and Hobbes is not for children. It's not for children, and it's not literature under normal definitions. Okay, so just look at the language. Read that to a small child and they will be completely baffled. So it's actually quite difficult to define kids' books. What's this book about? Well, you know, most children's books are about kids, and Winnie the Pooh is really about a group of young. It's anthropomorphized, but they really are children. They're about. I mean, it's about a group of imbeciles, really, isn't it? Trying to work out their society, basically. This book, the main character is adults. It was the adult in the house, and he's visited by an adult. Children don't appear at all. This book is about two adults. This book is about Flick, an adult. This book and movie. This book is about an old man. Pixar company is in trouble at the moment because their new movie called Up is about an old man. The toy makers don't like it. They say children don't like stories about adults. In fact, not true, not true. This story is about an adult as well. Now notice I don't make a differentiation between traditional books and movies and games. That's because kids don't make a differentiation. All licensed characters are licensed characters in their book. Okay, this book, this movie, which has become a series of books, also about adults. Even when kids write books, this is Daisy Ashford, who famously wrote a book at the age of 12, and this is the book she wrote. What's it about? Anybody read this? It's a long time ago. This book is about a love affair between two adults, so no children involved at all. Okay, so we've established that books about children are not necessarily children's books. What else? Children's books have pictures. There's a nice obvious point. Children's books have pictures. Well, The Hobbit, one of the best-selling children's books of all time, of course, had almost no pictures. There were a few engravings, I believe, that Tolkien did himself, but no illustrator as such. The current big bestseller, Philip Pullman series, no pictures. Some books do have pictures, of course, but let's take this in a new direction. Children's books have simple language. Okay, now this is, we've gone back to Where the Wild Things Are. Does this have simple language? We try to read this to a child. It's glorious pictures and glorious story, but the language is horrible. It starts off, the night, Max made mischief of one kind or another. Horribly convoluted, and words like mischief that kids don't understand. So, archaic, I find. Now, it was Dr. Seuss, of course, who decided that language was important. And so with books like Hop on Pop and Fox in Socks, he invented the whole genre of books that children read for themselves at an early age. So here's something we can say. The language, the vocab of books has been carefully thought about. That's something we can use to define children's books. Here's an electronic version of Green Eggs and Ham, and you can see how deliciously simple it is. Would you, could you, in a car, eat them, eat them? Here they are. Children's books have almost always something educational about them. Sometimes they're pure education. Magic School Bus, from beginning to end, is purely educational. Excuse me. Whereas other books are educational in a different way. The Berenstain Bears, again one of the best-selling children's book series of all time, is educational, but not stuff you would learn at school. It's stuff you would learn at church, but because so many children don't go to church anymore, the Berenstain Bears teach virtue, which has been surprisingly popular. Now, I talked about the trapdoor. You've got to know which market you're writing for. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly go through the markets. Board books. These are what's called pre-readers in the industry. This is the most famous of all the board books and the best-selling. These are for children aged 6 months to 5 years. Then we've got the early readers. These are for children aged 5 to 7 who can actually read by themselves a little bit. Next section is what we call the chapter books, which is school shorthand for kids aged 7 to 9. And they're just broken up into little chapters. Then we get the pre-teen books. Meg Cabot. Meg Cabot was in Hong Kong recently, and I was invited to meet her, and I thought, oh, I hate this sort of book, you know. And she turned out to be a real tomboy who hates pink, hates fairies, hates princesses, and wishes she were her brother, who is a SWAT officer and carries a machine gun at all times. So Meg Cabot is really cool. Then we've got the older books, the young adult books, which is Anthony Horowitz is the bestseller of the current batch, along with Darren Shan and of course Stephanie Meyer.